And so, what are your questions? In the seven branch prayer, or the seven branch practice, as Lama Eric likes to refer to it, one of the branches is the branch of requesting the Buddhas to turn the wheel of Dharma. And when you look at okay, I'll just start there. The branches of the practice include refuge and praise, so offering refuge and praise to the Buddhas. Confession, sort of acknowledging circumstances, and owning our karma. Rejoicing, and that's rejoicing in whatever virtuous activity there is, whoever is engaged in it, to actually cultivate the attitude of being magnetized to good activity, to good things. Then there's beseeching, or requesting the wheel of the Dharma to be turned. And in our lives, we often we have, I think, a view of education that's it's kind of a setup. From the age of about 5 on, we're shipped to school and we're told that we need to be there, and education just happens. It's kind of set up to try to seep into the corners of our awareness, but it's not something that we thought up from our own side and said, "Oh, actually, I'm 5 years old. I really should learn something. I think I've heard of this place called school. I should go. And once I'm there, I should ask the teacher for whatever would be useful." From the point of view of Dharma practice, we actually need to get into this frame of mind of it's actually up to us. We need to look at our own experience and to check in our practice and see what is it that's not clear? What's in the way of me taking another step on the path? So it's easy for us with this history. We see, now it's, there's a nice teaching, I think I'll go. The teaching was there before we made a decision about, I'll go or I'll not. It's interesting to actually be in the position of making a request for teachings. And this is one of the things that I actually found very rewarding, being on the board of directors back in the days Linda Logan was talking about, when there were 7 of us. We had 7 members, and we had 7 people on the board of directors. It's a funny thing. That's how it was. But back in those days, we really had to think, well, who are we going to invite? How will we actually kind of put our heads together to ask somebody to come and teach? And it's a very different feeling when you actually have to put yourself out like that. How are you going to kind of pull your energy together to make a circumstance where the teachings can come? And part of that is the part from our side of a willingness to put something into practice. That's the purpose for asking the teachings, is I need something to put into practice. So that's just a long way of saying, now it's up to you. What's your request? What do you want to know? What will help you put the Dharma into practice?
Maybe what would help me at least is developing more discipline and more stamina, I guess, in practicing every day. Just making sure that I get on the cushion for a certain period every day. It can be easy to like let a day slip there, and I regret missing the Karen and everyday practice series. I did probably some of those things came up, but sometimes it's easy to waver and not have that momentum that's needed.
Yeah. There is no answer. Or you could say, that's the sum total of practice, is remembering to practice. So you have to look at, you have to continually invent new tricks to keep yourself engaged. We were talking before about there are different points in practice for different reasons, but one of the things that we were talking about on the break was the point where calm abiding is, it ceased being super challenging and it ceased being kind of novelly entertaining. And it's kind of, So there are all kinds, it depends on exactly where you are and what's going on. But being able to find the things that actually unlock something. And the contemplation of the four thoughts that turn the mind, if done in a very personal way, where you really look at your circumstances, even if it's just the pairing of impermanence and the precious human existence. In precious human existence, it already sounds like a little bit highfalutin. It's really like the situation that I'm in that actually allows for so many possibilities. I have so many resources at my disposal with access to the Dharma, and this is actually could be very fleeting. To really, really take that seriously does kind of wake things up. And the same thing is true, looking carefully at what are all the things that I do? What are the choices that I make between doing one thing or another thing? And what are the impacts? What are the actual impacts? And if I take those and multiply them out by hours and days and weeks and months and years and decades, what do I get when I amplify certain ones? And then looking at, of course, just kind of the defects of the limitations, anyway, of all the churning of life that comes back around to the same sorts of things over and over again. So those kind of contemplations really done in a very personal way, not in the, well, now in the classical texts it mentions, I've forgotten how many hot hells and how many cold hells. Do you have, anybody happen to remember? I don't think it, you don't, if you read it, you don't remember it because it actually did not make a difference in your life. The whole frame of reference probably didn't make a difference. But you can spend a long time looking through that and memorizing it. But it has to be very personal. So that's one of the main things. The other thing is to make sure that you actually pay attention to where your practice is. And that you nurture it in a way that there is some sense of unfolding. And even if it's unfolding in relationship to a kind of a sense of stuckness, that, here I am with the stuckness. And that often requires consultation. or just sitting with other people, just hearing some random Dharma snippet that goes, okay, I'll go like this, not like that. But there's no magic. I'm sorry.
No, that helps. Thanks.
Just remembering to practice, just remembering during the day, and that one, you know, whatever aspirations we have, it's kind of, and one of the most traditional things is to make sure in the morning to have some kind of energy and clarity about what am I going to put my mind on today. And better to have one thing as opposed to a list of 10. One thing that I'm actually going to try to implement in the Dharma. I mean, only one? I want to be a better person than to just do one good thing in the day. Start trying to do one thing reliably, and then it goes. And then in the evening, check. Did it happen or not? That's really traditional, or very, very traditional teaching. People have been trying that for millennia, for exactly the same reason that you're asking the question. I wish there was a magic answer. I would have done a lot more practice. Yes.
I guess for me, it's I get pulled in too many directions, and I'm not very confident with what I am supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I require structure, or like here's your guideline to, here's your path. Like, do this in the morning, do this at night, do this during the day, and variety.
And variety.
Yeah.
Okay. Have we got a program for you? That, in a nutshell, that's what Boker Rinpoche came up with, and it has the structure. It has certain things to do on a daily basis, things to do on a quarterly basis if you want, and things to do make sure you do sometime during the year, and a sequence of if you were really speedy, 12 years. Or you could just stick with the part of it, and that would be 6 years. So there's 6 years, and then there's the icing on the cake of another 6 years. And that's if you really engaged in it in a very concerted way, so that you actually created the foundation for some successive investigations into practice. But part of it, he knew that he would say in pretty much every single seminar, we'd go to India, a few times that he did it outside of India. Every time he would say, and he was a lineage holder, so that meant he's like responsible for every single practice that was done in the Shangpa lineage, and also in the Karmakagyu lineage. He also was a holder in that, but he was the lineage holder in the Shangpa tradition. So you would think, oh, well, he should teach us everything. He said, no, my job is not to teach you everything. My job is to teach you just enough so that you have a complete path of practice that could lead to liberation. And so out of all the possibilities, he distilled down a path of practice that included the progression of calm abiding, insight, and Mahamudra. It also included Chenrezig practice, the Bodhisattva and compassion. It included Ngondro, the foundational practices, which allow us to kind of zero in on some of the challenges that we can find when we just sit and go, I put my mind on my breath, and that is about as successful as putting a marble on top of an egg. All the things that you can find out just by going into that, but the Encuentro practices break down some of the challenges in practice and some of the opportunities for cultivation. So he put that together as a package of practices.
So in order to be introduced to that practice, do you have to go to India? And
you don't have to go to India. I say it's literally to, but I say it kind of tongue-in-cheek. You could go to Argentina in late July or August, because Lama Eric is going to be leading a Mahamudra seminar there. Before the 1-year retreat and the 3-year retreat, Lama Michael and Lama Tara led Mahamudra seminars on an annual basis here. And so there are more opportunities than going to India, but that's one of the more reliable things to count on out in the future. At this point, Khenpo Rinpoche is doing the practices related to the first 6 years, 1 year, and then the second 6 years, another year. So it's every other year now. So you should have gone to India with us in January. I'm sorry. You were thinking about it. Yeah, I'm sorry that didn't work. Yeah, but there. I mean, I'm in the midst of presenting teachings from that now and supporting that, so you can get started if you're really interested. And this is really kind of why I'm just how interested are you? If you're really interested, we can do that.
so I just show up at one of the teachings?
You could, but probably better to, we can talk and then I can show you where to look and how to kind of catch up
to
where we are.
Marcy's comment and your response reminded me of the requesting the wheel to turn. It's when we have a desire to learn and that motivation, we find the teacher, and it also goes in a little deeper because there's more of a, we're not just showing up willy-nilly. But what I found I needed to progress my practice is being in Sangha, hearing the reminders, noticing being familiar with some things, and it's like, oh yeah, I'd forgotten that one. Also the feeling of just hearing your reminder, relax into it, relax into it. But so there's the confidence when I'm away on my own, away from Sangha, and on my own practicing, there's the confidence that grows from having those thoughts appear on my own, and then when that's augmented by being in Sangha, where there's just more reminders. And then, because I also like the regular and the non-routine, the unfamiliar. So it adds. There'll be some new teaching, and whether it's in a reading or whether it's here, but the being in Sangha and hearing our teachers and hearing the questions brings a certain familiarity and a certain confidence, and just by hearing seeing those little things surface. it's not really a question. It was just you had asked us what moves our practice. So it's the reminders, the familiarity, and being with others, teachers and other practitioners.
So I think you asked what we wanted to learn more of, or sort of what we wanted to, what sort of teachings we were looking for, kind of something like that.
It's a little bit more pointed than just generally what teachings. It's what do you want to put into practice?
Well, I'll tell you what came to mind, and you can tell me if we need to discard it or not. But
okay.
I've always had experiences of energies in my body that have been very curious, and I haven't encountered not that I've looked very hard for it, but I haven't encountered a teaching that has helped me to work with those internal energies, and that's something I'm interested in, because it's a continual thing that happens, and it feels as if it's purposive, but I'm not sure how to channel it or to work with it, and so I'm curious about that, and that's a teaching I am looking for, or that I feel like I could use. So I don't know if that fits into this conversation, but
it does.
Okay.
People have a wide range of experiences in life and in meditation, and some people can identify certain kinds of energies or experiences that you could use the word energy. Others, it's less, more subtle, or just not part of their panorama of experience. So this is something that just through the general response is this is something very individual. So it's best actually addressed individually as opposed to as a general teaching. There are various practices that work directly with various energies. We would experience them of the body, but we just call them various energies and movements of energy. Those practices within the Tibetan tradition are only explicitly taught after a considerable amount of basic work is done. There's a considerable amount of work that will allow us to be with the experience without having a lot of kind of a rush of preconceptions, without having some judgment that this is kind of a special experience, even though it may be unusual relative to other people, that it's not special, to be able to really be with experience in a very simple way. So there's a certain amount of foundation work like that. There's also work that needs to happen with the development of our motivation relative to bodhicitta, really becoming more deeply tuned to that as a fundamental motivation in all moments of practice. One of the challenges with experiences that are like this, that are kind of intense and energetic, to sort of be duplicative in the staying. One of the challenges is that they can kind of magnify our attention in a way that only occurs within kind of the framework of this is my experience, a very dual perspective. And to the extent that these experiences, sometimes these experiences can be very kind of intensely pleasurable, or at least very interesting. And so from that point of view, they can feel like entertaining, and they can feel like an experience to be cultivated. And this actually veers away from bodhicitta, and it actually veers away from insight. It tends to make experience more concrete. So the basis of that kind of basic stability of mind, and also beginning to develop the capacity to look into the nature of phenomena, nature of appearances, so that we're not captured. So we're not captured in both ways, both with the experience and with the sense of the specialness of the one who's experiencing. So this fits into a pattern, but we can't say, oh, thou shalt not have experiences of a certain kind until you get to a certain point in your practice. This just doesn't work. So this is why this is a come as you are party. So then we have to just respond to it. But in this case, I'm kind of creating the context for why this actually is it's a personal conversation. But there isn't any experience that cannot be a door to insight. And that's probably the most important thing to think about in terms of these experiences, is that they're not, you could say, they're not special in and of themselves. They will only really become special and valuable if they're actually a door to insight. But getting to a point where that's actually possible, it takes some doing.
And by insight, you mean insight into the nature of phenomena?
Nature of phenomena,
or the
and
nature,
the nature of awareness.
One's own nature?
Yeah, Buddha nature. So these are all.
Okay, thank you.
A little bit more about we're kind of going around and sharing what moves our practice forward, or what, going back a little bit to the conversation about what helps us with stamina or continue to practice. For me, it's having something that kind of excites me, you know, having something, and I tend to want to go into a book or go into some material or practice and read into it, and that helps me gain some excitement about it and then want to stay on the cushion. So it's the feeling of like newness, and I recognize that that's kind of an obstacle in the sense that it's like we don't want always something novel to be the only carrot, you know, that moves us forward. But
it's okay.
Yeah. But not only just material or new practices, but just like you mentioned, the feeling of something continuing to unfold. And what gets in my way is when I don't feel that it's unfolding, you know? So just in a very behavioralistic way, you can see how that's self-defeating. Yeah.
Often it's unfolding even when we don't think it's unfolding. But having the stamina to sit with it when it seems to be stuck, that's actually really important.
That's kind of a follow-on question that I have. Sorry, I didn't have tea. So there were a couple things. One of the things that works for me is just I'm super goal-driven. So if I have a target, you know, if I set myself up with so many Nundro repetitions and I have to get them done by such and such a time, then that just drives me totally. But it almost becomes obsession, so there's a problem with that. And then the other part of it is there are times when you just don't feel like doing anything, but it's better to just do it and keep doing it, and eventually you break through, and then you get through that stuck period. But it's also those two kind of interweave, the goal driven, but then when you don't feel like doing it, or you're distracted totally, still is it okay to just persist and do it even though you're not totally not totally connecting with the practice?
If it's not okay, in common parlance, I'm screwed.
Okay.
You mentioned, like, well, you can go off the rails this way. You can go off. There isn't any direction you can go where you don't go off the rails. That's sort of part of the tragicomedy of it. The goals and the counting and recitations and all these things. It can be a kind of an organizing principle, a motivating factor, but then it can be an obsession where there doesn't feel like there's anything besides this large echo of the count of numbers. But the obsession itself can become the basis for practice, because chances are this isn't the only place in our life where obsession shows up. So this is it. That's it. You were not obsessed about anything else. No, I'm sure. So then you have something that's it turned into just obsession. But then you say, okay, I have a really reliable obsession. So now I can actually see what that's about. So it goes on, it goes off the rails, and by virtue of going off the rails, if we ride it, it comes back onto the rails, but in a way that could not have happened unless we went off the rails.
Kind of works out perfectly because we're just playing out our own stuff that needs to be worked on anyways in the practice itself.
If we stick with it, we have to go into it far enough so that it actually the obsession actually bothers us. As opposed to becoming kind of I'm really good. I got my whatever number of recitations of mantra or whatever it was. I've got that done before anybody else did, and it's been 5 years, and every single quarter I've gotten done first. You could spend a whole lifetime like that without ever recognizing the obsession involved. But it's humorous when it happens to somebody else. One of Ken MacLeod's stories that he tells on occasion is that he noticed that on a retreat there was somebody, when lunchtime came around, this fellow was always first in line. He was just like, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. And finally he just mentioned, I noticed you always seem to get first in line. Oh. Day 6, last in line. Day 7, last. Day 8, day 9, last. And Ken says, so it seems now you're always last in line. And then he was exactly in the middle. He couldn't, no matter what it was, he couldn't, he sort of had to, at some point he would probably have to see something about this, but this is, this is funny when it happens to someone else, but we'll all have some variation on something like that, our own personal line strategy.
The flip side of the obsession is also is habit. So habit works really well to just, when you're really sleepy in the morning, this is what I do every morning, get up and do this thing, it's sort of a habit. Yeah. And that I don't even have to think about it, it keeps it going.
Yeah. that habit has one great advantage when it kicks in all circumstances. So you actually have the wonderful opportunity to practice in all kinds of circumstances. You practice when you're feeling sick, you practice when you're feeling perky, you practice when you're falling asleep and hitting your head on the table. You practice in all kinds of conditions, and that's actually really, really good. One of the sadder things is to only practice when conditions are ideal. Because I guarantee you, when we're dying, conditions will be, by definition, not ideal. Just that won't be there.
I kind of think about it like Woody Allen. So he said, I think he said this, that 90% of the deal is showing up. So like on those days when I'm just like, man, I don't want to do this, I don't want to meditate, I kind of, I don't really say to myself, but the goal for me is just to sit on the cushion, and I try not to think about the time after that. So I don't know if this makes sense, but but I think that we can kind of look at something that we're going to be doing and sort of get into thinking, oh God, it's going to take so long, and I got to do this and blah, blah, blah. So for me, like, if I think about just showing up and just sitting down, like, I can do that. And once I do that, the rest of the process kicks into gear. So that's helpful for me.
Who else has something that they can think of that would be of benefit to their practice? Claudia.
So I'm from Maine. This is my first day here, and I live in a very rural area, so practicing in a Dharma doesn't happen very often, or Sangha, I'm sorry. So daily practice has been quite a chore in the beginning, but now I feel I can't go on with my day without it in the morning. But the whole practice, I feel like if I incorporate it throughout my day, it becomes easier in the morning. The habit, being present throughout the day, and taking those mini breaks of being present, aware, and even just a few breaths. I practiced in the airport. I had an hour wait, and there was busyness all around me, and it was very distracting and very annoying. And so
a perfect place to practice.
It is. And I sat right in the middle of it, among all the noise and the chaos. And I just found that I was able to sit with it and, actually settle in and be comfortable with it. And I never would have been able to do that without this practice. And anyway, I'm just a beginner. I've been doing this for just a few years, but the practice daily and the practice throughout the day, I think, just even if it's a mini break.
What's your main practice?
My daily practice?
Your main.
Throughout the day?
No, your
Or-
main formal practice.
In the morning
Mhm.
when I sit. Generally, I don't know if you want to know my whole regimen, but I usually write. I just slam down on a piece of paper first, and then I light a little bit of incense. I have, a special area in my room where I sit every day. So first of all, that's really important to me, is to have that space. And it's a comfortable space. It's a space where I feel I can settle in most of the time. I have an altar. I've added candle, whatever helps me kind of get into that moment. And I have a timer, and this is kind of a question to you, but I have a timer and I try to time it, 40 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever I have available. And I know that there are times when I get very restless, and there are times when I've just finally stopped because I felt like I just couldn't keep coming back. But with that said, now I've learned to kind of get through that restlessness and do sit through that whole timing. And I've used many Lajong and loving kindness and breath. I don't know, just the more tools I feel I have in my toolbox. And Nate's gifted me with many books, and anyway, that's all I really have to add. But bringing it throughout the day is just been really important.
One of the things that it's good to do when we have a longer session, and 40 minutes is long enough, is to actually make sure that we have some brief sessions within that, particularly if we're cultivating calm abiding using the breath, so that we can actually really, instead of sort of being there to actually really be present in kind of in the sense of like actually focusing the camera, so we're actually really there with the actual flow of the experiences as they unfold, and doing that for just a minute or even just a few breaths at a time, and then just relaxing all intention except for the intention to remember to start up again briefly. To do that's one way to encourage deepening in practice. So it's time to dedicate going back to the space of bringing to mind our connections to all those near and far, the past, the present, the future. And to offer the merit for the liberation of all beings.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
is as long as the bookstore person is here and the bookstore person isn't here. Other than that, cash